Biden has COVID.
Is what?
COVID.
Bummer. Can you hear me? All right. We're going to do the call to order. At this time, I will call the July 17th, 2024 special meeting of the Architectural Review Committee to order. Roll call. May we have a roll call, please?
Committee Member King?
Here.
Committee Member Rivera?
Here.
Committee Member Kiefer?
Present.
Committee Member Haas?
Present.
Let the record show Chair Bouchard is running late. He will join later in the meeting.
We're going to move to agenda finalization. Are there any changes to the agenda?
There are no changes to the agenda.
Okay. All right. Section 1, public comments. That's nice. This is the opportunity for members of the public to comment on any items not appearing on the regular agenda. Because of restrictions contained in California law, the Architectural Review Committee may not discuss or act on any item not on the agenda, but may briefly respond to statements made or ask a question for clarification. The chair may also request a brief response from staff to questions raised during public comment, or may request a matter be agendized for a future meeting. Public comment will be limited to 3 minutes. Are there any public comments?
Do we have any members of the audience wishing to speak on an item not on the agenda? We have no one looking to speak.
Beautiful. We're going to move to item 2, approval of minutes. On the approval of the May 1st, 2024 minutes, are there any requests to speak on this item from the public?
Do we have anyone wishing to speak? There is no one wishing to speak on the minutes.
Okay. Are there any changes to the minutes?
There are no changes.
No changes. Do we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion. I'll second.
Beautiful.
Okay. Let the record show a motion was made by Committee Member Rivera, seconded by Committee Member Haas, to approve the minutes of May 1st, 2024, with Chair Bouchard absent. Motion carries.
All right. Moving on to item number 3, new business. Am I reading this whole thing?
No.
Okay.
You can just announce the item. Conditional use permit number 16-040B.
Beautiful.
My apologies, I'm bringing up the presentation. Sorry about that. Good evening, committee members. My name is Manuel Rocha, Assistant Planner here at the City of Cathedral City. Today I bring before you conditional use permit number 16040B for the expansion of an existing cannabis cultivation site into an adjacent 2,500 square foot building by the applicant Neil Richardson on behalf of JN Stock. The proposed project is located at 35655 Bankside Drive. The property is zoned Commercial Business Park District with the general plan designation of Business Park. Within the site, there are two existing buildings. To differentiate them, the building to the north is Building 1, and the building to the south is Building 2. The project site is approximately 25,852 square feet in size. The site fronts and takes egress and ingress from Bankside Drive. The site has been developed under the original cannabis entitlement approved in December of 2016. Landscaping for the site will remain as approved under the original entitlement. The project consists of 8,390 square feet of cultivation, distribution, and ancillary space. This square footage requires a total of 9 parking stalls, including one ADA van stall. 16 total stalls are provided, therefore the project meets the minimum parking requirement. Here you will see a current view of the project site alongside Bankside Drive. Here you will see Building 1, which is currently occupied by the applicant with the cultivation and distribution use. Here is Building 2, which is the subject building of this application. The applicant is proposing to expand into this building and occupy it with the cultivation use. Building 2 is a total of 2,500 square feet. The applicant does not propose any expansion of the building and will maintain the same building footprint. The floor plan shows that the building will be solely used for cultivation, including 4 flower rooms, a vegetation room, and a dry room. New condenser units are proposed to be installed on the backside of Building 2, which will be structurally mounted to slabs. They will be conditioned to be screened from the view of the public right-of-way. Here you will see the elevations for Building Number 2, which is an existing 13-foot-high manufactured building. The building is constructed of metal panels and metal roofing. The applicant will modify the building facade for Building Number 2 by adding a red, thick brick veneer wainscot to match the facade of Building Number 1. The color scheme of Building 2 will match Building Number 1, consisting of an off-white color for the metal panels and a flat white for the metal roofing. Recommendation: review the proposed project to establish an expansion cannabis business cultivation site within an existing 2,500 square foot building and recommend Planning Commission approval of conditional use permit number 16040B. That concludes my presentation, and I'm available for any questions.
Does the commission have any questions for staff?
I have questions. So will there be any new roof-mounted equipment?
No. The AC units will be placed behind the building.
Okay, behind the building, okay. And one concern I have to mitigate smell, there's all these, because of the type of building, the original building, there are all these they're like roll-up doors or sectional tilt-up doors. Those are being sealed somehow to...
Yes, so there is one...
Those are being modified?
So there is one roll-up door, but the applicant has informed me that it is not used, it is not open at any time.
Okay.
It will not be open.
I understand, but will they be modified somehow?
No, they will remain out.
So they won't be, they're not going to be sealed when they're closed all the time?
Yes, they'll be closed, they will remain as is.
So
Okay, but
if I might, standard conditions of approval for cultivation does require odor absorbing or odor neutral type of improvements, and that typically does include sealing the roll-up doors in the interior. So we will require that as a condition of the CUP.
Okay, that's critical because that has been a problem with some projects.
So just to confirm, sealed on the inside, but remains the same on the outside? Okay.
Correct.
Correct.
Do you have any other renderings?
Unfortunately, this is the only one that was provided.
Okay. Got to use our imagination.
So just for reference, it will match the brick veneer that is on Building Number 1, as shown here.
Okay, there you go.
Anything to the parking lot looks pretty bad, too. All the cracks and stuff.
John?
Apologize.
Oh, just wondering, I'm looking at the asphalt in there, and it's a lot of cracks. Are they doing anything about that, or?
Actually, well, no. What happened was when this went through an entitlement process before, They cleaned up the whole frontage and they repaved that whole area there. So the picture you're getting right now
Is an old one.
is not a good picture.
Okay.
It shows it after a rainstorm, but it was resurfaced. I went out there and there wasn't a legitimate reason why we would have them do anything
it out.
additional.
Okay.
Any more questions for staff?
So, let me steal this back from you. So there were recent site improvements, so accessible parking, all of the parking issues are addressed already?
Yeah, everything was addressed and including, they have sidewalk across their whole frontage.
Okay.
And they abut up to a property to the north that doesn't have sidewalks. So they've done their improvements. And you have also reviewed this site before for the cell tower at the back. And most people aren't noticing it because you did a great job because it really blends in. Because I had to look twice and go, I remember this site, what was it for? And then I had to go look it up. And I was looking at pictures of it on Google Maps. And I'm looking right at the tower and I'm going, oh, it matches pretty good because it didn't stand out.
So, a comment, not directed to this application, but in general to staff. I believe some kind of colored representation is part of the required documents. It is extremely helpful to have that.
Yes.
As the chair mentioned, so we have to use our imagination to visualize how the colors are applied. This is pretty straightforward, so, but I'm just saying,
No, yeah.
if staff would please make an effort with.
My apology. And it was requested, it just wasn't provided in time.
Okay. But otherwise, the project overall looks reasonable.
Cool. I think we're done with staff. Does the commission have any questions for the applicant?
No?
I don't have any questions. What was that? Okay. Does the applicant want to add anything to the comments?
So unfortunately, the applicant couldn't be here tonight.
Okay, well, that handles that. I'll now open up public comment for this item. Are there any members of the public that wish to speak on this item?
Do we have anyone? It looks like we have no members of the public wishing to speak.
Okay. Are there any further public comments? If there are no further public comments, I will close public comments. I'll now ask for a motion from commissioners to open discussion in a second.
I didn't have any recommendations. It seems
Yeah.
pretty straightforward.
Yep.
I would, unless someone else, I would make a motion to.
Okay, yeah, let's make a motion to approve.
I hit it.
Okay, I'll second it.
I can't see that window. To vote.
You can, if you want to tell me your vote, I'll.
Yes.
Yes, okay. Committee Member Haas, it looks like you didn't vote either. Did you not get
Oh.
the?
There you go.
Yep, okay.
Sorry, still getting used to this new system.
Thank you. So let the record show, a motion was made by Committee Member Kiefer and seconded by Committee Member Haas with Chair Bouchard absent to approve. Motion carries all ayes.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on to public hearing item 3B. Specific,
It's just new business, no public hearing.
what was that?
That was just an error on my part. It's just item 3B. It's not a public.
Okay, item 3B.
Yeah. Did you have a presentation?
Got it, okay. Good afternoon, members. This project is a specific plan amendment and a design review. The applicant is requesting approval of specific plan amendment 99-58-A to the Uptown Village specific plan to create a new planning unit 4, and to accommodate a 115,000 square foot, 2-story self-storage facility, and also future commercial uses on the 7.16 acre site located just east of Date Palm between McCollum Way and Rosemont Road. And also corresponding development standards for the build-out of the site, and approval of design review 23-003 for the storage facility, and development of the remaining acreage of the 7.6 acre site in phases under 2 different scenarios, build-out scenarios. This is the project site. It's relatively flat. The surrounding land uses include vacant land to the north, some developed land and vacant land to the west, developed land to the south, and developed residential single-family homes to the east. The site is designated as general commercial on the city's general plan and planned community commercial on the city's zoning map. So these are the proposed development scenarios. Scenario 1 is a 2-story self-storage facility, 150,000 square feet, and associated retail space, office, and loading areas. 2 drive-through restaurants, one at roughly 2,400 square feet, the other at 4,600 square feet. 3 retail buildings, 2 at 3,200 square feet, and 1 at about 4,700 square feet. And associated parking, trash enclosure, landscaping, internal circulation system. Also, landscaping in terms of along the street frontage, but then also on-site landscaping related to the site, and that amounts to about 21% of the site. And a monument sign for the overall facility at the main entry on Date Palm Drive. The second scenario is, again, 2-story self-storage facility, 115,000 square feet, associated retail space, office, and loading areas. A big box retail use of about up to 50,000 square feet. 1 retail building, roughly 4,700 square feet, and again, associated parking, trash enclosure, landscaping, internal circulation, and the monument sign. This is the new planning area, the planning unit that the applicant is proposing. All the other planning units in this area have been built out, so this is a remaining 7.16 acres is the remaining area. This is the conceptual site plan for scenario 1. You see the storage facility, which is labeled as number 1, and then you have the other retail uses and restaurants on the remainder of the site. And again, keep in mind, this is conceptual about what could be developed on the site under this scenario. This is scenario 2, where you have the storage facility, a big box, and then one retail building of 4,700 square feet. This is the overall site plan. I'll zoom in later here on a couple of other exhibits here. Here's a blow-up of the site plan. So the proposed storage facility will have 842 storage units, ranging in size from about 25 square feet to 250 square feet. That's a pretty wide range. Ingress and egress is off of Date Palm, as you see there in the center of the site. That's going to be the main ingress and egress to the storage facility. It'll also, though, serve as entrance into the remainder of the site. So it'll be a shared access, ingress, and egress to the site. The elevations, I know you understand you also have a packet in your, along with your staff report, but in terms of the architecture, the building is proposed to be at 32 feet height. I believe your staff report said 34, so my bad, it's 32 feet height, a couple feet lower. And the building will have a contemporary architectural style. It's combining a bunch of metal canopies, corrugated metal roll-up doors, perforated metal panels, metal coping, textured metal panels, different stucco finishes, stone veneer, and then mullions around the window, aluminum mullions around the window. These are the materials, kind of gave you a better idea of what they're proposing. As you can see, the metal canopies and the stone veneer, the different stuccos, sand finish stucco. You have some perforated metal panels also along the front. So a good combination of different materials for the building. Here's some perspectives of the building and what it would look like. You could see the metal canopies, how they pop out from the facade, so it breaks up the facade. It's not just one solid wall. The different bandings of the colors and the metal also breaks up the whole wall. Up in the upper left-hand corner, they have some could look like windows, but they're not. They're just there to kind of break up that whole facade, to not make it have one just solid sandstone color along that facade. So it does give it some life. Along the front, on the bottom right, that's what faces Dave Palm. They have that angled V, off-centered V roof, pitch roof there. I think that just adds a little flavor to the building. And then there's some glass around the building as well to kind of just also break up that facade. In this case here, that's a stairwell in that corner of the building. This is the floor plan, nothing spectacular. It might look like a cell block H to you, but it does have 2 loading areas, 2 elevators, and then the stairwells are in 3 corners of the building. Second floor is not much different other than the loading areas. And it's basically really a flat roof with the exception of the off-center V-shaped roof towards the front that you see here on this exhibit. So the specific plan amendment establishes development and architectural standards, which will have materials that harmonize with and enhance the surrounding architecture. It establishes diversity in building materials to create visual interest and provides flexibility for future development of the site. And those projects will respond to market demand, and they'll maintain the architectural and open space standards that contribute to a safe and attractive commercial center. Both scenarios are considered most intense under either development scenario, and future development proposals would be able to make a finding under CEQA. And this is, I've never seen this done before, but the developer, he did the environmental analysis, not just for the storage facility, but he did it for the entire site. So any future developments that come in, that's pretty attractive to a developer. They don't want to, usually environmental studies take 6 months to a year, could be longer. In this case, it will be done, and it's very attractive to other developers because they don't have to go through that process and hire consultants and do all these studies again. They could just make a finding off of that adopted mitigated negative declaration is what the applicant is shooting for, and I think it'll help develop the site a lot quicker. In terms of the specific plan for the remainder of the area, it identifies and establishes architectural forms, and just to be clear, that the architecture for the remainder of the site is not really intended to promote any particular type of architectural style, but yet provide design features that would represent the types of development that would be comparable to what would be allowed under the specific plan for Planet Unit 4. In terms of building form and massing, these are examples of what that could look like for the remainder of the site. You have varying roof lines that enhance the building form and architecture. You have some covered patios, trellises, and whatnot, that also would provide some shade, provide articulate building mass. The one here on the upper left is a much larger area that really accentuates the entry into a building, but it also has some canopies that pop out, similar to what the storage facility would have. In terms of open space and shading, I would definitely encourage outdoor plazas and patios. You could create some really interesting spaces by landscaping. You could have low landscape walls here that also break up the facade, but also allow some kind of screening, some kind of privacy, semi-private, by having these planters out in the patio and plazas. Shade umbrellas, it could be, again, like I mentioned earlier, trellises or shade structures that provide some kind of shade. Low walls that provide an area for people that might be able to sit underneath the shade. Again, metal and fabric awnings, just all to be done at a human scale, I think adds interest and attracts people to these areas. In terms of facade articulation, again, varying details around openings. There could be arches, trellises, wrought ironwork. Provides an opportunity to, by having articulated facades, that you got an opportunity to have different colors depending on, to add depth to the building and the architecture. And the buildings, the facades, should reflect the building structure and scale, again, and the overall plan of the site. Pedestrian pathways are very important. Need to promote pedestrian safety, always have designated or just marked pedestrian pathways, either through pavers, striping, just designated brick, could be, whatever it is to just accentuate that and protect it once they get out of the vehicle lanes, to protect those by planters and landscaping to kind of beautify the area. They should be thoughtfully separated from parking lots and vehicular movements, and through just creative design and building structures. This is the landscaping for the storage facility. They will use a wide variety of drought-tolerant plants. This is pretty standard, what I've seen in Cathedral City of this plant palette. It's a good variety of shade trees, which you want, big, large trees that have 30-foot wide or diameter canopies that at full growth will provide a lot of shade for the area, especially under the environmental conditions out here related to heat. Accent shrubs as well. I've listed in the staff report, there's quite, this is I didn't list them all because I'd probably take up the whole page, but it's quite a bit. And these in desert spoon, ocotillo, red yucca, they add color in my much lower areas around the building, which I think will really liven up the site. The tall palm trees and also the shade trees, some of them also will flower, so it provides some color during different times of the year. And as usual, the final landscape plan will be reviewed by city staff. It also will be reviewed in conformance with CVWD's strict water requirements and the specific plan to make sure that everything is in order. The specific plan also establishes, let me kind of go through this. In terms of date palm, this is the frontage of a date palm along the frontage of the storage facility. So you could see the large palm trees, the large shade trees. They even have low block wall. It's not one solid long block wall. There's short little block walls that I think provide they block the views of the cars in the parking lot, but also break it up to add some kind of interest to the landscaping. This is an elevation of that same plan view, where you could see the shade trees, the palm trees. You could see the low block walls along the edge of the parking lot there that block the cars from just seeing cars in there. This is the main entry into the storage facility on Date Palm. Again, a lot of shade trees and palm trees at the entry with a lot of accent plants on the bottom that add a lot of color. I think it really accentuates the entry here. Here's an elevation view of that same location. You could see its relation to the landscaping. There's a sidewalk on one side. The trees are fairly large and tall, which really accentuates the entry here. And you have the monument signs as well on either side. This is on the northern end, Rosemont and Date Palm, very similar. Palm trees, large canopy trees, and a lot of the accent plants down there at the bottom that add color and provide just an enhanced aesthetic for the site. This is a elevation view of that same area. Then the monument sign. So it's a combination of metal, stone veneer, again, tying the building together, the stucco finish, raised letters off of the sign just to give it that three-dimensional look. I think it really works well for the site. Oh, I do want to go back to one thing, the parking. So the city's requirements require one space per 1,000 square feet. And you can imagine 115,000 square foot facility requires 115 parking spaces. And that's just a sea of asphalt that we've talked to the applicant in coordination with them. They've done some research. They've looked at the Institute of Transportation Engineers. It's a very thick document, and it's something that's it's used nationwide, and it's got some very valid data. And they come out with, for storage facilities, 0.1 space per 1,000 on weekdays and 0.09 on weekends, which will total 12 parking spaces and 10 parking spaces respectively. In addition, the applicant has done some research along in the valley. City of Palm Springs requires a total of 6 spaces for a self-storage complex, and City of Palm Desert requires 6 spaces plus 2 spaces for each caretaker unit. This facility will not have a caretaker's unit. So we believe that the parking is justified to have a reduced parking. The city does have reciprocal parking agreements in other areas where if a business closes at 5, that parking is available for another business that's open till 9 maybe to use. So it allows flexibility in the parking, and I think it'll work well for this site. And so we believe that it justifies a reduction in the parking requirement.
I think it'd be a fair reference from the code book from chapter 10 for occupant load, because the occupant load for a building like this is going to be pretty light.
Yeah.
To give you a
Yes.
ballpark idea of the reduced parking, it should be a pretty reasonable reduction.
We believe it is. In the rear of the building, there's some roll-up doors so that, those be used by those storage units. So it's parking in the back. You're not going to see it from the street. So that parking will be very limited. I think on an average, they're there 15, 20 minutes max. Mainly the parking in the front for people to go in and find out what units are available, what are the rates, they're not there very long. So we feel this is pretty consistent with what's been happening in the valley.
Mm-hmm.
So with that concludes my presentation. If there are any questions, the applicant is here as well if there's any questions.
Does anyone have any questions for the applicant
I had a
or
comment.
staff?
I had one comment on the architecture. I love the architecture for a building like this. It's going to be a really good-looking storage facility.
Yeah, I haven't seen a storage facility like that ever
And I
before.
personally
so.
like the nod with the colored grid. I like the nod to Mondrian on the side of the building.
Oh, yeah.
It's a classy touch.
It is.
The rendering we were looking at, that was the 2-story option or the 1?
No, that was a 2-story.
Okay. I'm guessing the 1 story would just be the same, but 1 story?
That's the 2-story.
Okay.
is what they're proposing.
It's the nicest storage facility I've seen.
Indoor, air conditioned,
Yeah,
for this area, highly needed.
it's beautiful.
Is this a conditioned space? Will there be roof-mounted equipment?
There'll be roof-mounted equipment, but it will be screened.
It will be screened?
Yes,
Okay,
will be screened.
okay.
Do you guys have any questions for the applicant? Would the applicant like to come up and share anything?
No?
Yeah?
Good afternoon, Commissioner Steven Nieto with the Altum Group, representing the applicant. I'm not the project architect, I'm the project planner, working with city staff. I thought Martin did a great job of presenting the architecture and the specific plan. I don't have anything else to add, but I'm here to answer any questions that you may have on the architecture.
I think it's a beautiful
Okay.
building. I think we're good, yeah.
Good, thank you.
All right. I'll now open up public comment for this item. Are there any members of the public that wish to speak on this item?
Yeah, we have no members of the public wishing to speak.
Okay. If there are no public comments, I'll close public comments, and I'll ask for a motion from the commissioners. I'll make a motion to approve. Oh, hold on. There you go.
Let the record show a motion was made by Committee Member Haas, seconded by Committee Member Kiefer. Motion carries.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
You ready for the next one?
Click it out, I'll let you.
We have one more? C, yeah. We're going to move to item 3C, zoning code update.
Just that for short people. Good afternoon, committee. Cynthia Schultz, Associate Planner. This is my first presentation to your board, and I'm excited to bring this forward for your input. All right. First of all, I want to thank everybody who's taken the survey. I appreciate your input. I know it took a few minutes. There were only 6 questions on the survey, but the survey was very thoughtful, and the questions required some thought to answer those. So thank you for your time. So this is about the zoning code update. So this will serve 2 purposes. It will give you an update, and we'll also solicit your feedback and input on the survey, on the zoning code and the priorities that we would like to have going forward as we forward your recommendations, any recommendations that you have this evening, forward those on to the City Council. So this presentation will talk about why we need a zoning code update, what that will entail, and about how long that will take. So the zoning code that we have right now was adopted back in the 1980s. I'm sure it was a great code at the time, but it is showing its age. It's been amended over the years. It is by its design, it is law, so it is an actual law. So it's a very static document. Anytime we need to make a change to that, we do need to bring an ordinance forward to make a change to our city code. We've heard a lot of comments from our development community builders and so on, and from our elected officials and others as well, that this can actually sometimes be a deterrent to development. We've also noticed that a lot of other cities in the Coachella Valley have taken on a zoning code update of their own. This is an opportunity for us to watch and learn and see what's happening out in the community so that we can remain competitive and at the front edge of development in this community. We do want to be a competitive city, we are a dynamic city, and we also want to have a distinguished look to us. So with all that said, the code that we have really does need to be rewritten. I outlined in the presentation here just some of the goals that City Council has identified that would support rewriting the zoning code as it is today. And I think it's Goal C8 really sums it up in that the city is looking for a facilitative versus a regulatory framework for development review. So just to give you a little bit of information on the background of the relationship between a zoning code and the general plan. A general plan is a it's a long-range document. It serves about a 20-year time frame, and then it gets periodic review every 5 to 10 years. What it entails are a lot of different elements, the housing element, land use element, environmental. It talks about a lot of different things, but it also encapsulates the vision for the community, sort of what is our long-term vision, where do we want to be 20, 30, 50, 100 years from now. And what the zoning code does is it provides us with a set of tools and vehicles, how we get from where we are to where we want to be. So those are the relationship between the two. And the reason I point that out is because that the zoning code is not a way to revision the community, but it is a way to revision how we navigate the pathway forward. Again, I think what's important to note is that this is going to be a process. We figure this will take about 18 to 24 months from start to end. We'll have a robust public engagement process as part of this. We want to engage a steering committee as well as a technical advisory committee. The reason we're doing all of this is we really want to focus our efforts on this piece of the request. We haven't gone out for a request for proposal on this yet, but we're looking for guidance on how we frame the scope of work in that request for proposal. So we are targeting the best, most qualified consultant to complete this work for us. It will be a very costly, time-consuming, resource-intensive process. We want to make sure that we are aiming our sights in the proper direction. If we don't do that, I feel that, well, we as a team, I think, feel that we could very easily get drawn off course, which happens, and we don't want to have that happen. The brief outline of the immediate time frame. So we're presenting this to you this evening. We do have this then presented this evening to Planning Commission. The comments that are received from these two boards, as well as from the Historic Preservation Committee last night, those comments will be congealed into a document, and then a presentation to City Council will be presented mid-August. If they select their priority goals, we will formulate those into the RFP, into the scope of work, which the most of it has been drafted, but we really want to, like I said, formulate the policies that are in that, and we'll put out the RFP and then hopefully select a consultant early in October. So as I move through this, I will go over the results from the survey that was sent out. And again, thank you so much for your time on that. Realize that I did send it out to 21, all of the members of the City Council, the Planning Commission, Architectural Review, and Historic Preservation Committees. Sent it out to all those folks. We did get 13 anonymous responses, 1 vote per person. But I want to go over those results, give a little bit of explanation, allow you a chance to ask any clarifying questions if you don't understand some of the things that we're asking for. And then at the close, as we wrap this up, we'd like you to sort of select 2, 3, 4, 5 of the policies, practices, procedures that you think should be prioritized by the city and then carried forward into that RFP. So before I get started, any questions on what's being asked or good? All right, terrific. All right, so the first question in there was a question on how design guidelines should apply. So you just saw a couple of projects come forward to you that applied design guidelines. Should the design guide, it was quite unanimous in how we had 13 responses affirmatively indicating that yes, they should definitely apply to downtown, but maybe they should also apply to mixed-use residential. Maybe they should also apply to commercial and mixed-use infill, mixed-use development as well. Very good question. Do we want to include both of those, make those requirements, and do we want to make those standards rather than guidelines? If we make them standards, our code would probably move forward as what we'd call a unified development code. So they would be a congealed document. They'd be unified into one document rather than having the zoning code be in the municipal code and the design guidelines be a standalone separate document. The second question had to do with the type of design guidelines. So as I mentioned in that survey, there are two types of ways that we can apply those design guidelines. Are they subjective or are they more objective? There's pros and cons to both. I think you can see in this slide. So the top is the response to objective design guidelines, which are more prescriptive, and the bottom response is the response to the subjective. There's definitely clear support for objective design guidelines. I think that tells us quite a bit. The option that I put in the middle was an option to create a pathway that we don't have in the code right now, but to create a pathway that allows for an alternative compliance. So if a project comes forward and maybe it doesn't meet to the actual point of objective guidelines, that there would be a way for a developer to say, I have a better idea and I think it's going to comply better, but the board wouldn't be able, in theory, board might not be able to approve it because it doesn't meet the criteria. But there would be a way to say, let's review it under alternative equivalent compliance. That seemed like it got a lot of support. I asked that question a couple of different ways in here and got great support both times. So the third question had to do with development standards. Development standards are different. They talk about things like lot coverage, building height, density, those types of standards, whereas design guidelines talk about building articulation and facades. Again, here we had that red bar shows that question and that response to the question on alternative compliance. Strong support. That was a 13 out of 13 responded, yes, we'd like to have that. The other responses that show up in here is blue and orange represent the downtown having separate design standards from other areas, and then orange also is support for standards that are based on the area, either the geographic area or the zoning district. So those are pretty clear responses as well. The green bar talks about development standards that should apply to multifamily housing. I think the question becomes, do we want to have separate design standards, or development standards for all of those different communities? I think that's a very good question, and we would like you as the Architectural Review Committee to weigh in on that. Question for economic development and infill opportunities. As I mentioned, the city does want to remain highly competitive within the valley and within the larger region. One of those opportunities is to fill in some of the vacant spaces that we have. We have a lot of vacant spaces in the community. We also have a lot of vacant buildings. So one of the things that we're looking for are, what are some of the tools that we might do in order to try to recruit economic developers, people who might bring new shops, new stores, new buildings, new businesses to our community, and that will help increase the tax base. One of the things that we had asked about were parking standards. The one clear thing that we did here is that we are interested in looking at flexible parking standards. You just heard from the last presentation that maybe our standards are not quite as flexible as maybe they could be. So that is one thing that we heard quite a great support for. The highest support we got here was 10 responses out of 13. There wasn't any support for maxing out, having a maximum number of parking spaces. And that's fine too. You'll see that where there is no bar at all, that's what that is. We also have options or support for assessing our downtown residential and mixed-use districts to make sure that the uses that are allowed in those areas are allowed for the appropriate types of uses. There's a lot of support for expediting development approvals that attract a mix of both primary jobs and economic development opportunity. I think those things are great, and then if we have something that promotes what that economic development driver is, it's an awesome opportunity to put projects like that either in front of the line or expedite them in some other fashion. The fifth question had to do with pro-housing. What I'm referring to as pro-housing. Pro-housing is a term that was created by the California Housing and Community Development Department, but it really refers to housing supply production, which is a very hot topic, as you all are probably very aware. What are those tools that might help support housing development And how can we, as the city, what should we be doing to help encourage that? And should we be encouraging that? So I think that, you see the highest bar here is the support for, again, a ministerial review process, which would allow something to not have to appear in front of this board, not have to appear in front of the planning commission, but just go straight through staff, check the box, they move on, and they get their building permit, move forward. But as you can see from this graph, the highest responses that we received were the purple and pink, and those were 5 people who supported those ideas, and I'll just give you an idea of what those were. And I apologize that the full descriptions didn't show up on here. The purple and the pink have to do with increased lot coverage allowances. That's when it's to construct an ADU, and promoting housing supply production through incentivizing standards, such as allowing more height or greater setback for specific housing types. And that would be specific type of housing that we would know in advance, so there would be no guesswork allowed. The reason I'm spending a little bit more time on this slide, and I'll delve into some illustrations as well, is that this is a very important topic, and you'll see by the results of the last question, which indicate that housing and housing production is the #1 policy out of the 8 policies that we promoted. But I wanted to give you some ideas of what some of these options for using these tools, implementing these tools, if we were to implement some of these tools within the city, what some of those things might look like. Now, as we look at the next several set of slides, I'll show some examples. I'll go through those rather quickly, but you'll get an idea of what some of the what other communities have done. Keep in mind, most of them are not desert communities, but I'll also show you some examples of projects that were approved in our community. There's a duplex and a triplex. These were produced, attached to existing single-family residences in San Diego. Here's a duplex that's in the city of Palm Springs, and then a triplex on the right. Again, these are mostly single-family infill lots, so these are not large, 10 or 15 or 20 or 50 acre. These are, typically a 1/4 acre, 1/5 of an acre, 1/6 of an acre, smaller type single-family lot. It's either 1 or 2 lots side by side that are put together. Another infill site here on the left. I mean, that one stands out a little bit more. It stands out in its color and its architecture. It definitely stands out. And then the one on the right is interesting. It's actually a 4-plex that looks like a single-family residence, but it's a 4-plex. Here's a couple examples again. And this infill 4-plex on the left-hand side is a front street-loaded and alley-loaded side by side. So there's 4 units, 2 floors each, and that's on a single-family lot, as well as the one on the right. The reason I kept the one on the right in here is just to show you how design often can push the envelope. There are specific considerations with a structure like that. As you can see, it's out of context with the buildings next to it, and so there's additional design considerations that we'd want to make sure that we're taking into consideration as we review projects like that. Here are a couple examples of some courtyard projects, courtyards, cottage courts. Both of these look like the one is from Palm Springs, the other one I think is also from California. But these are more of a traditional model for multifamily homes. This was very popular before the mid-century. A way to get 6, 8, 10, 12 units on a single-family lot or 2 single-family lots of record. But this is an example of a way that we can push density, or we can do incremental density, or what's also referred to as gentle density. I threw this one in there because this is a famous courtyard example. This one is in Santa Monica. It was the first historical landmark in the city of Santa Monica. It's over 100 years old now, but it was refurbished, and it is hugely popular, and it's quite beautiful. Another courtyard example. The one thing that I want to point out here is that as we're talking about things like development standards and how we should push for development standards, as you heard in previous applications, looking at development standards and particularly landscape, making sure that we have adequate shading, really good landscaping standards will set us apart from other desert communities that might not require the same amount of shading. It's also a way that we can help contribute to alleviating climate change by trying to moderate or mitigate the temperature change. As you've heard, sea of asphalt can really raise the temperature in a community. It can have a lot of impacts. So we can do a little bit in the planning realm that will help to mitigate that. And it also makes the community feel a lot more friendly and helps mitigate this isn't a larger one, but say a larger building that's set in among buildings that are smaller in scale. Here's a couple of different, more creative options as well. The one on the left is courtyard mini homes. Those are probably 400 or 500 square feet each, and they're detached, but set in a single family lot. And then on the right, you have what look like two single-family units, but there's actually 5 units set in that sort of single-family look-alike setting. Here's pushing that density a little bit higher, so it's taking kind of the concepts that we've been looking at, but building upward rather than just keeping sort of a single or 2-story footprint. So this is pushing that density even higher. I showed the one on the photograph on the right because that's an example of an incremental growth where the building on the left is probably a 40-foot building. And if they raise the building height to say, they allow the building height to go to say 60 feet, and instead of building the building to 60 feet, they'll allow the building to go up incrementally. And they'll say, the buildings to your left and right are only 40 feet, you can only go up by a set amount, like 20% or 25%, so that it can't go up to the full amount. But what it does is it gradually is able to lift the building height without making such an impact on the neighbors. I included this table in here because what we're looking at is the way that the code is today. So this table is actually not in our code. This was created outside of our code. It was created as a part of the housing element. And what I've added here was the density, the maximum density that's allowed in the various districts. The districts are across the top. Those are all of the districts that allow for residential development. The types of housing are along the left-hand side. And it just shows how many are permitted by right. If you take out the 2 rows of P, well, actually 3 rows of P, the supportive housing, transitional housing, and secondary dwelling units, you'll see that a lot of them are allowed only with a conditional use permit in many scenarios. So what we're looking at is how can we allow more housing in more locations with fewer trips to either this board or to the Planning Commission? How can we put some of that, where's the comfort level of a trigger point that allows the city to say, we'll put that in staff's hands. We'll say, you don't have to go to the ARC or you don't have to go to the Planning Commission for approval of that. You can approve up to 10 units, you can approve up to 12 units, you can approve up whatever that number is. We're looking for some guidance on that and if that's something that the city would like to move forward with. So you can see on the table on the right, it does take a substantial amount of time. It takes a few months longer when we do bring projects forward to either this board and or the Planning Commission. This also came out of the housing element. It just talks about different priorities and the housing element's ways of looking at incentivizing housing. It's really talking about how can we incentivize, how can we promote, and how can we encourage. Again, back to we really want to be a facilitator of development and not a regulator of development. It's a carrot versus stick approach. So here are some examples of projects that were approved recently. This one was approved back in 2022. It's Newport 17. It's 17 apartment units that are on 1.5 acres, so it's 11 units per acre. I missed the zoning on this. Was that DR R3? I don't remember what the zoning was. I apologize. I missed that. But it's just one example of a project that maybe instead of having to come in front of ARC and Planning Commission, maybe it's something that staff could have reviewed and approved administratively. These will go up in density. So the next project is something that you probably also saw recently, Canyon Springs Villas. These 58 units on 3.5 acres is on the southeast portion of Ramon and Cathedral Canyon. This one achieves 16 units per acre density. And I wanted to also mention, in the table that I showed previously, where we were talking about maximum densities. Our maximum densities are set based on a net lot coverage option. So those are the maximum that could be achieved. They're not a given. So through a really good design, if a developer or designer, architect team can do a really good design, they can push that density up slightly from where they might otherwise have gone. The next project was another recent project, Grove Apartments. This is 19 units on a small vacant infill site, just under 3/4 of an acre. 28 units per acre are achieved here. This was zoned DRN. The DRN zone and the MXC zone have a unique way of calculating density, which is based on bedroom count rather than on straight unit count. So you might be able to achieve higher density in the traditional way that we count density than you would if you were just going by a unit count. Parking requirements do remain the same, and they are tied to units. So again, is this something that maybe the staff could have approved? It met the parking requirements. It meets checks all the standards for, facade articulation and things like that. The landscape plan met all its requirements. Can we approve that at a staff level? Is that something that the boards would be happy for us? It would relieve you of some of your work. And then the last example I have to show you is right across the street from City Hall here. It's the Cathedral Town Villas. They achieved 61 acres on just over an acre of property. This one's zoned MXC, which is very similar to the DRN zoning. This is an interesting project, as a lot of the parking is actually underneath the building, which saved some of that site for residential development. Because structured parking is so costly, so extremely costly, they were able to achieve some cost savings by building 3 stories rather than building a traditional 2-story building. So this one achieved 46 units per acre. So there's the end of the examples, and as I said, I would show you this one last. This is our last policy or last survey question item. The first thing that came out, this was a ranked choice voting option, and promoting housing supply production was the #1 policy that did come out. Did indicate in the slide here, so you could see how people voted on that. That one did receive a couple of first choice votes, second choice votes, and third choice votes. So it did come out as the top policy priority among the 13 people who responded. Creating new development opportunities was also a priority. Promoting uses and developments was also a priority. Let me just go through these in a little bit more detail, and then we'll wrap up and take your questions and move on to your comments. Really would like to hear from you. This is allowing for, pardon me. The second one was creating new development opportunities through incentives or other means for mixed-use development. One thing that I did want to point out, and I wish I would have put in a photo of our zoning map, but the majority of the land in the city of Cathedral City is zoned as residential, R1, R2, that type of zoning, and so it kind of constrains what we can do with it. So even if we do push higher zoning in some of these mixed-use areas, it doesn't leave us with a lot of land on which to do that. It's kind of why I focused a lot of my effort on showing you what we could do with the existing zoning for the mass of land that we already have here. The other options that are under this are promoting uses and development patterns that support pedestrians, cyclists, and transit use. That was the third priority. I think the fourth priority comes out. It's evaluating the non-residential uses to ensure they're appropriate in their zoning districts, and creating a process to allow some currently unlisted uses. Currently, the way our zoning code reads is that, and this is typical with zoning codes, is that if a use isn't listed, it's prohibited. You can't get it. It's not available. The fifth priority was addressing climate resilience and urban heat, and providing incentives for mitigations. The reason I included that one is that, as you see on here, there were 4 folks who actually ranked that first in their response, and then there were 2 folks who ranked it third. So while it didn't come out as a #1, it came out as #1 for 4 people, and I think that was significant. So I did want to make sure that you were aware of that. That really does conclude my presentation. Are there any questions for me? And then I'll open it up to discussion.
Any questions? It's a lot of information to absorb.
I know, I threw a lot at you.
My
in a short
brain's going to
amount of time.
explode.
So I have a couple of comments and a question, but the comment is to put the zoning ordinance in context. When a project is new, that is basically the guideline. It sets up the criteria, the design criteria for the site development, for parking, for setbacks, for height, and design criteria. So so basically, what is being presented is setting up this tool for architects and developers. These are the guidelines that they will follow, that will establish and push along and shape and form the types of designs that will come forward to this board and to Planning Commission.
Right,
So it's really important.
yes. It's essentially, it's the cookbook.
It's a cookbook.
Mhm, and they're bringing forward the recipes and asking to prepare the dish for us, so that's,
So the one question I had that you caught my ear was that the design guidelines are being pulled out of, separated as a standalone document?
they are right now.
Okay.
They're a separate standalone document. They were created after the zoning code was adopted, probably also somewhere in the 80s, just based on their drawings. But right now, that's how they are. We are considering whether we should put them with this zoning code update, or if we should even just look at doing a unified development code, which would include both.
Okay.
And that is sort of a little bit of a performance-based code, it's a little bit of a form-based code, and it's also it wraps all three types of codes together. Form-based, meaning it's very much about what it looks like. Performance means it's very much about how it operates. And then Euclidean zoning, which is a crazy way of just saying, we zone by the use. So there's three types of zoning that get sort of rolled into one.
I like the idea of standalone because it can be something that can be modified more easily and updated as.
That's true.
Committee Member Rivera, could we speak closer to the
sorry.
mic? Sorry. Thank you.
I was saying I like the idea of the standalone document because it makes it's easier as a function of updating through the city to respond to emerging building technologies or
Designs.
designs
I like that as well.
project needs, housing, those types of things. And where technology is taking us, we're moving very quickly into the future is upon us, that how we live and how we move around and how we operate in our communities is being shaped by technology. So getting those types of things, we would need something that can be updated without, more frequently.
Would it be an easier process to update the design guidelines if it was a standalone entity?
Well, it's sort of not an either-or conversation, but it probably would be easier to do that, although I don't know the last time that the design guidelines have actually been updated, and they are a standalone document. But if they are in the code, within the code itself, we can do that as well. It just needs to go forward with an ordinance, meaning it has to go forward to City Council. I say that, but the practical reality is anything that we hold a developer to is really at the purview of City Council. So how we treat it, right now it's standalone, meaning that it's somewhat subjective and it's required, but I'll leave it at that, but ... So if we had it within the code, there's a lot more muscle behind that, there's a lot more teeth behind that. And then we would want to make that most likely based on the results here. And to be fair to a developer, when they come into our office, they want to make sure that they know what we're telling them and what they see in front of them, what they can read with their own two eyes is, okay, I know how to get through that hoop. I understand what they're asking me for. I can deliver that. So, I don't know if that answered your question.
No, it does. Yeah, I feel like design in general should be a little more collaborative, maybe a little more subjective, just because, it's staring in all of our faces every day. So
Exactly.
I like the idea of the whole process of streamlining and putting some things together, but yeah, I think there should be some things that don't remain static, that can be changed a little easier.
I did want to speak to the subject of streamlining. That, if not carefully and thoughtfully done, it can be a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it becomes very attractive to builders and developers, investors, for a streamlined process. On the other hand, it can be a little bit disastrous. We have a lot of new staff on planning, which I think is a good thing. But there have been some poor decisions in the past, such as approval of painting colors, and we see that in some of our retail and commercial buildings, and especially along Ramon Road and other places, where careful consideration was not given, and we end up with something that we have to live with for a long time until the next building owner decides to update or upgrade. So those types of things are important. And I would say that over the past many years, and I would like to not point out to Commissioner Malakoff, who can speak to that, that we have seen a lot of improvement in our city over the past 10, 15 years, architecturally. The level of design has really stepped up over the past several years. And compared to where it was, 17, 18 years ago when I first joined the ARC, huge difference. And so I would just not want to see it revert back for the purpose solely of streamlining.
I think the hardest part is going to be finding that sweet spot between streamlined development and thoughtful development. And that's probably keeping you up at night.
It does. All my career.
And one of the things, I touched on it on an applicant that was in earlier, that I made a comment about the colored renderings or some colored depiction of any type at all. There have been problems with applicants in the past that have not submitted a complete package, and yet we are required to make decisions based on what we get, even to the point of that, printed color in the graphics. This is not a good example, but when we have color samples that are given to us digitally or in print, it's not the same as getting material samples, which is a requirement of the application for a lot of projects, and we don't always see those. Very rarely do we get those. Those are the types of things that help the design process move along much quicker, make a much more an informed decision.
Okay. I am making notes. Thank you.
I'm going to repeat this because I said this last night at Historic Preservation, but I like the idea of the more bringing in some higher density projects as a way to help solve the problem, or at least address the problem of housing, the need for housing. I think that's a really critical challenge that's put upon us these days. And I like the creative solutions. You mentioned some of the ones that, it's a duplex, it's a fourplex, or there's 5 units in here, but from the street, it has that look of just, single. It doesn't look like a multi-unit building.
Right.
There's something to be said for that.
Well, and that's exactly what we hope when we get design guidelines that help facilitate that, help encourage that. And we want to make sure that we're not prohibiting that. That's the absolute truth. We want to make sure we're not inadvertently creating a code that doesn't allow for something like that.
Will there be a discussion on height overlays? Is that being altered at all in R1 zoning?
We haven't talked about that at this point. I think we're looking more at the larger, higher level policies at this point. But if we do get to that point, yeah, I can see having height overlays. We do have
I think you get a lot of drawback on it, especially in R1.
I wouldn't doubt that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and that's why one of the things that we want to make sure in the process of writing this code is that we are including a steering committee and as well as a technical advisory committee.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts? I have some things written down. We will be forwarding your comments and feedback, so I don't want to say that this is your last chance. There will be other chances. We'll bring this back in front of the ARC as well as the Planning Commission and the Historic Preservation Committee at some point, but this is really so that we're making sure that our target is focused where it needs to go.
I did want to add that I appreciate the comments regarding the density and the design of some of the housing typologies that we showed, because a lot of the goals there had high ranking for promoting housing. We wanted to see what the committees would be open to. So the examples that Cynthia provided do show, the triplexes or the fourplexes and single-family zones. Sounds like this body has support for that type of design. We also talk about densities, and what I wanted to point out was that Grove project that the ARC, moved forward to Planning Commission, they got approved. That density, those zones allowed us to count like a studio unit as half a density unit. So it allowed us to basically have 2 studio units and count as 1 density. And so that was a creative way in that zone district to be able to allow for higher densities in our residential zone. And so one of the things we may end up looking at is a similar type of density calculation in zone districts other than the MX zone or the downtown residential areas. And so, but I wanted to point that out because I wanted to express my appreciation for the support for design standards such as that.
I touched on emerging technologies, and there are technologies that are here now. For instance, electric cars. One of the things I hear a lot of people talk about, even people who own electric cars, I don't yet, finding charging stations. If that is something that can be worked into the city planning that we have within, make them more high profile, make them more available, it would be a draw. I mean, if you can go out to dinner somewhere and there's handy places to charge your car while you're dining, I mean, that might sway your choice and bring in a little more business into Cathedral City. I also wanted to add to the comment about the housing. I forget who said this, but I want to say I heard it first from Charlie McClendon that, how we identify in Cathedral City, how we distinguish ourselves from our other desert neighbors is, Cathedral City is the place where you want to raise a family. And so the idea of home, of having a home, building a home, I think that's really important. That's a critical element of our city.
I like that.
All right. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We're going to move to item number 4, election of chair and vice chair.
May I make a suggestion on that? Chair Bouchard's not here today. We expected him to come in a little bit late, but it looks like he wasn't able to make it. In the past, previous boards and perhaps even this board has deferred the elections until the full board was present. And
He's
so,
lost his opportunity, so he's out.
so you may wish to consider that.
I'm just kidding. Yeah, that's fine. We can defer it. Do we make a motion to defer it?
Well, why don't we just do that just to be on the safe side?
Okay, I'll make a motion to defer the election of chair and vice chair.
Where do I go back to that? Where do I go back to that part? Vote.
It shows that the motion was made by Committee Member Rivera. But the
But
motion
it was
made by-
actually you, Committee Member Haas, right, who made the motion to
Yeah, I made the
continue?
motion.
Yes, Tanner Haas.
I was a little too quick on the trigger there, sorry.
No worries, no worries.
Mr. Techie over
I
there.
got really excited.
All right, so let the motion, let the record show a motion was made by Committee Member Haas, seconded by Committee Member King, to continue Item 4A, selecting a chair until the full committee can be present. And we will go on to do that same vote for the vice chair.
All right, make a motion. There you go.
I'll second.
All right. We're still working on it.
Let the record show, motion was made by Committee Member Haas, seconded by Committee Member Rivera, to continue selecting a vice chair until the entire committee can be present. Motion carries.
Okay. 5, commissioners' reports. Are there any comments from the commission?
I think it's discussion of future agenda items that's next.
Say it again?
I apologize if it's mixed up on the script I gave you, but it's discussion of a future agenda items.
This particular item is just if there's any items that the committee may want to have staff bring forward for discussion. It's just an opportunity for the committee to identify items.
I don't have any items.
Okay.
Since I touched on it earlier, if it's possible to bring it up for a future discussion, I was talking about, commercial and retail painting largely being a staff assignment, approval at staff level. Maybe working out some way to involve the ARC, but still at some level involve the ARC.
Okay, I put that down in my notes.
Okay.
Yeah, hi, Conan here. When they bring in the submittals or the paperwork, do they bring in full-size plans? We get a chance to look at those? Like the landscape plan, like I can't read this. I don't know what size box trees they're talking about. I can't even read the name of the trees. Do we get something like that? I think we did it at our other meeting, Dean, right?
Yeah, let us look into that. We're moving to an electronic submittal, even with development applications where we will be getting everything electronically, and so let us figure out how we provide that. And is it particularly the landscape?
Maybe not a full-size one, but a half sheet or something that you can at least identify and see what it is, because part of my question or part of my thing I'd like to see is more canopy trees in the city.
Noted.
We're able to click on the PDF of each single thing within this program, correct?
Correct.
Have you been doing that? That might be an easier way for you to zoom in on all this stuff within each.
Zoom on the PDF and then blow it up and look at it that way?
I'm just saying.
Well, I mean, I can do that. I just didn't know. I asked if it's just normal procedure when you're going to approve something, if they bring in, John was just saying about the bringing in the samples. I mean, I didn't know if this is what you do. You bring in the landscape plans, you don't. Just a question.
One thing that would be helpful is in the preparation of the slides is the image resolution. That the plant palette, the landscape palette that you're referring to, I couldn't read it. Yeah. I mean, I could see it on the screen, but I couldn't read any of the text. It was blurry.
Okay. No, we'll definitely work on the resolution and the landscape plans.
Is there any other updates on the area across from Trilusa with the 2 stores going in? Is anybody else committed to that project?
No, not yet. For purposes of the agenda, do you want to go to 6 staff comments and then we'll circle back to committee comments?
Yep. 6 staff comments. Do we have anything from the staff?
No comments.
Okay. And then committee member comments, back to that. Does any committee member have any comments?
So Committeemember Kiefer. So we haven't had any new submittals for that other than the Starbucks and Chipotle, but we do know that future users are Circle K with a convenience store, excuse me, and Farmer Boys.
Okay.
Nothing there.
Yeah.
All right. Make a motion to adjourn.
Meeting is adjourned at 4:56.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You guys gave me a tough one, man.